The stench of human entrails overwhelmed Major Crawford's senses as the video feed showed the gruesome scene. The Zeka savagely feasting on the screaming astronauts near Mars. Nothing could have prepared humanity for such open butchery and violation. Rage boiled within Crawford, his knuckles white as he tightened his fist. The quantum railgun was untested and unstable, but it was humanity's only hope. Failure to activate it meant the extinction of humankind. In orbit, Zeka and human ships clashed in fiery chaos. Crawford watched the black EIF fighters dart around the massive Zeka vessels, attacking supply ships with focused fury. In the control room, Ava stared at blinking red error messages on the monitors. The capacitors for the railgun surged dangerously. "Instability," she said evenly to Crawford. "These power spikes could blow the whole railgun system." Crawford turned to the screen showing the captured Zeka scout ship as it approached Camp Armstrong. Inside, the Zeka crew hissed and snarled in confinement. "Why are you here?" Crawford demanded coldly. The aliens clicked in reply. "Your race is insects to be crushed," one said through the translator. "The Zeka Empire rules thousands of worlds. Your end comes soon." But their boasting revealed useful intelligence, a weakness in their hull alloy. When struck at a certain frequency, it became brittle as glass. Crawford knew one mistake meant oblivion. He devised a daring plan, a cosmic game of chess. They would use the Zeka arrogance against them. Disguised in the scout ship, his team would infiltrate the flagship. A message for humanity: they would not cower. In the hangar, the EIAF strike team boarded the alien ship with quiet purpose, weapons ready. Crawford took the pilot's seat, the controls foreign under his hands, but his resolve burned steady. They drifted toward the massive Zeka vessel, ready to cripple their command and give humanity a chance. Failure was not an option. They entered the enemy's gaping hangar, prepared to show the galaxy that humans were deadlier than anyone thought. And Crawford and his team moved through the tight corridors of the enemy flagship. Dim blue lights cast shadows on the walls that looked more like guts than a ship. Their boots clanked softly on the metal floor. Their helmet displays flickered as they walked the maze-like halls. The alien tech was nothing like human ships. Ava guided them from Camp Armstrong with quick commands. "Left at the next turn," she whispered. Crawford nodded, eyes scanning for danger. Danger came as a Zeka patrol. Tall, too many joints, skin like oiled leather. They passed unseen, thanks to Ava's hacked signals. The pulsing power core loomed, shielded by alien metal. Crawford set charges at key points, focused on placement and timers. Precision was vital. Static cracked over the comm. "Crawford, they got me in the east section," Harper said, calm but urgent. "Stay put, we're coming." Crawford's choice was instant, a soldier's creed. Ava guided them frantically through the maze back to Harper. They found Harper cornered by a Zeka squad. Before the aliens reacted, Crawford's team struck with precision. Weapons fired in bursts. Harper broke free amid the chaos. Now with Harper, they retraced their steps urgently but calculated. Time slipped away as the charges ticked down. They passed open cells filled with defeated aliens, each marked by servitude. Silent pleas followed their escape. A vow passed between them, to return and end the Zeka tyranny. The sprint to their ship was a blur of motion and narrow escapes. Time marched unrelentingly. Once aboard, they launched clear of the flagship. The charges ignited in roaring fury, leaving the flagship a blossoming inferno, a defiant human beacon in cold space. "Hit?" Crawford's voice thundered over their escape sounds. "Hit," Ava confirmed, relief and triumph in her tone. The Zeka fleet faltered, chaos in the explosion's wake, giving humanity more than hope, a chance. The Zeka flagship exploded in flames, fire engulfed metal and bodies. Pieces fell away. The flagship, now just a space graveyard. Ships swerved without commanders. Tight formation collapsed. Ships crashed into each other. Disciplined pilots now panicked. Orders stopped from admirals. Silence on their communication channels. Crawford stood under tactical screen lights. His voice firm, he broke the quiet on the EIAF bridge. "All ships attack, full assault," he said. The room burst with energy. Officers shouted orders. Operators readied defenses, their weapons turned space rocks to dust before. Now they would wreck enemy ships. Sweat dripped as fingers hovered over ignition switches. "Cannons charging!" a technician yelled. The room hushed, waiting. The hum of ion cannons rose, then fired beams of raw energy. Enemy ships exploded into husks. Cheers erupted, but stopped. "Section 4 satellites gone!" a radar operator shouted. Screens flickered and darkened. The cannons surged too much. Orbital defenses crippled. Crawford tasted bitterness. Earth exposed, defenses broken. Word spread below, cities to rural areas. Radios reported Earth's place in Zeka plans, a highway axis. This truth fueled their hunger for Earth. "Earth is key ground," Ava said urgently. "They'll come back." Crawford watched monitors showing Earth's response. Civilians filled factories, trading goods for weapons. They shaped metal into guns, plastic into armor. Old soldiers trained the willing, squares, barns, wherever was open. Politicians echoed those ready to fight. Crawford barely heard them. He made guerrilla raids, ships darting out, hitting Zeka supply lines, vanishing. Each raid cost fuel, ammo, Earth's dwindling reserves. In the war room, Ava looked at the hologram of Earth's remaining defenses. Crawford leaned over the console, eyes circled from sleepless nights. "Should we talk?" Ava asked. Crawford's jaw tightened. "We talk. We show weakness. They regroup. We die." He planned the next attack on the map. Red engagement paths. "We'll hit their fuel next," he said coldly. "Buy time to rebuild." Each strike scarred Earth but one time. The choice was clear: talk or sharpen swords. Crawford's mind spun with tactics and troops. He steeled for either. Earth would not surrender. Earth would fight. Earth would endure. In the middle of Camp Armstrong, Crawford was surrounded by top military officials in a cramped steel room. The air was stale. Screens showed countless Zeka ships coming. Generals and leaders argued loudly, scared of losing again. "We can't fight them head-on after they beat us last time," one general said, wiping sweat off his forehead. Crawford slammed his hand on the metal table. "We won't bow to these monsters. They see mercy as weakness, and we're not weak." The doors opened with a hiss. 3 aliens from the last fight entered in colorful clothes. Their wide eyes took in the bare human room. "We've come to help Earth fight the Zeka," one said in steady, accented words. Crawford nodded at Ava next to her blinking console. Her new tech was hooked into the room's systems. They listened as the aliens shared inside knowledge about Zeka attack patterns, ship frequencies, and overconfidence. It was valuable information. The mood shifted from despair to determination. Human cunning combined with alien insight to make a battle plan. Mars was chosen for its orbits and dusty terrain. Crawford's orders rang through the ship. "Get the fleet ready. We ambush at Mars with full force. No retreat. Their turf, our victory." Ava's fingers raced across the keyboard, sending commands to prep Mars. Screens showed ship formations and attack plans, the cold math of war. Time was running out as the Zeka fleet sped closer. Each second mattered. Humans and allies gripped weapons, ready to meet the enemy head first. At Mars, dust swirled in the thin air. Earth's ships hid behind moons and in canyons, waiting. "We make our stand here," Crawford said. Faces around him echoed his determination. "Today we fight for all under Zeka rule." The Zeka fleet approached like a coming storm, but on Mars a spark of defiance was ready to erupt. The engines kicked up red dust as they roared to life on Mars. In the black sky above, our fighters danced with the dark Zeka ships, dodging and striking like boxers in a ring. My heartbeat pounded as lights flashed on the console. The odds looked bad, but Crawford's voice came over the radio, steady and commanding. "Stay tight. Hit them hard and fast." Ava's fingers flew, hacking the Zeka signals. Their communications turned to chaos. The laser blasts barely missed, singing my fighters' paint. We tore into the Zeka front line, and their ships scattered, breaking ranks. Alarm screamed as we took a hit, sparks erupting. The air hissed out as oxygen levels dropped. "Crawford, we're hit. Oxygen failing." "Copy. Stay awake. Ava, get them out." I drifted, the squad tumbling lifeless in space. Silence crept in as we gasped for vanishing air. Ice formed on the controls. Darkness threatened to take me until Ava's voice cracked through. "I'm coming, hold on!" She roared in, dodging debris to grab me. My lungs burned as I breathed borrowed air. We barely made it, space ready to swallow us whole. We regrouped behind Phobos and took stock, checked weapons, patched wounds. Ava sent what looked like a battle update, a sliver of hope. "We've taken their command ship." Crawford studied the map, tactical mind engaged. "Good. Let's use their guns on them." He issued new orders, each word deliberate, each plan daring. Our allies nodded, faces steeled with purpose. The Zeka still pressed their swarming ships, adjusting to our surprise assault. The seized ship loomed, its guns turning on its own fleet, unleashing hell on those it once protected. Zeka vessels broke apart in silence, tumbling tombs drifting in darkness. In the cold void around Mars, Earth's alliance fought on, bloodied but unbroken. Inside the ship, Ava worked fast, screens filled with code as she typed. She sorted data, assembling the pieces to hack the Zeka system. Crawford watched nearby, bandaged but focused. "This code is their weakness," Ava said, pointing. No frills in her words, just the blunt facts that could cripple the Zeka. She explained her digital virus plan tailored to blend the alien leaders. Crawford nodded curtly. That was all Harper needed to launch the mission. Harper gathered his team, 2 engineers, 2 soldiers, their eyes steady, hands sure. They boarded the Zeka relay silently, ghosts moving through the alien structure, splitting up inside. Harper walked alone down a humming, blue-lit hallway. Gunshots rang out, human weapons firing, Zeka shrieking. Aliens swarmed the corridor, mandibles clicking, antennae twitching. The soldiers fired controlled bursts, dropping twitching Zeka bodies, their blue blood pooling. Harper pressed on as his team shrank. He reached the core covered in alien marks. He planted the device as Ava instructed, triggering the spreading virus. Lights flickered. The station shuddered. A roar filled the relay as the virus crippled Zeka systems. Back at camp, Ava watched chaos unfold on screen. "Harper, status," she demanded through the comms. "We did it, but not many of us left," Harper replied, breathing hard. "Get out now!" Ava commanded. No time for hesitation. They sprinted through crumbling halls to their ship as systems failed around them. Ava saw their return on screen, her virus still unraveling Zeka command. "It worked," she reported to Crawford. "They're in disarray." But the Zeka evolved fast, patching the breach with new code. Crawford stood, pain clear but resolute. "No time to waste. We strike them now," he stated. Camp bustled with urgent purpose. Fighters rolled out, filling the air, engines rumbling a death knell. Below, civilians rushed to shelters as sirens wailed. The surface emptied, leaving the sky to the interceptors. Crawford donned his helmet, visor reflecting the battle ahead. "This is it," he said. "Make it count." As Earth braced for the Zeka counterblow, the stakes were clear. Triumph or be forgotten. Space awaited Earth's answer. The battle alarm screamed. Crawford stood before his team as they readied for combat. "Hit them fast, hit them hard," he said. "Take back the elevator." His squad grabbed their rifles and sprinted to the ships. Engines roared as the ships blasted off, racing to the moon. On the moon, a deadly fight was on. Plasma lit up the darkness. The space stations looked like forts under attack, but still standing. Soldiers waited inside, faces set with determination. Their eyes reflected the glow of explosions as Crawford's team landed in chaos. Dust floated up and slowly settled in the low gravity. They moved fast toward the silver elevator spire. The control room was wrecked. Zeka troops in shiny black armor chittered challenges. Crawford fired his rifle, the shots punctuating his movements as he took cover. Soldiers charged the Zeka, shouting fiercely. Metal clashed on chitin. Gunfire boomed in tight space. Sweat and blood floated freely as they grappled in low gravity. Back at base, Ava worked fast. Her fingers danced on the keyboard. Screens streamed data as she reinforced the ion shield. She muttered calculations, barely heard over the drone launch. The drones zoomed past the windows toward the Zeka ships. Drones swarmed the Zeka ships, harassing them. Ava's drones targeted engines and weapons. Each small victory brought hope against the attack. Suddenly, a Zeka dreadnought charged through. Its massive guns turned toward Earth. Panic surged. The guns began to glow. Crawford saw and knew what must be done. "Strap in!" He gripped the controls. The ship pivoted and flew straight at the dreadnought. In the control room, Ava watched anxiously. She entered the final code for the shield, praying it would hold. As Crawford's ship raced toward its target, she activated the shield. Blue light enveloped the dreadnought. Its blast reflected back and consumed it in a blinding flash. The dreadnought disintegrated, peeling away like burnt petals. Crawford's ship spun away, righting itself. The fleet hovered, scarred but alive. Ava and Crawford met. They reviewed the fleet and defenses. They counted the dead, hardening with each number. "We held," Ava finally said with sorrow and pride. Crawford nodded, eyes on the hologram map. "We did. Now we prepare to fight again. They'll come back." "We'll be ready," Ava replied, already planning repairs. The air crackled with the aftermath, along with deep resolve. Earth had held against the Zeka. The cost was high, but they would stand again. People moved bricks and metal on still damaged streets. Earth healed from the attack. Cranes lifted walls, while workers shouted numbers over the din. Dust blew from construction. Once armed soldiers now wore hard hats. Their guns traded for tools. Screens and speakers talked about the dreadnought's destruction. Crawford walked the streets, unnoticed. His eyes approved the rebuilding. His mind raced with plans. Deep in Camp Armstrong, Ava sat amid monitors and open hardware. Her hands adjusted circuits, glancing at engine schematics unlike any seen before. Engines to bend space itself. Crawford entered the sealed room. Ava looked up, code reflected in her eyes. "Quiet out there," he said. "For now," Ava said, turning back to her work. "We can't wait for their return." Holograms floated strategies, shields, forts, armed satellites, new warships. Crawford considered them. "What if we strike them first?" he asked. Ava paused, soldering iron ready. "We've never attacked first," she said. "If we don't, they'll come again. We barely stopped them." At the round table, faces from Earth and allies met. A feathered alien suggested peace talks. "The Zeka respect strength, but may want a truce," it said. Others scoffed. "Show weakness, they'll finish us," a man said, fist clenched. Crawford's voice cut through the room. "No truce. We show them what attacking Earth means. We take the fight to them." Murmurs spread, some uneasy, some agreeing fiercely. Ava finished adjustments on the warp drive. "We can have a fleet ready, armed, warp-capable." Crawford nodded. "Good, I have a plan, Operation Starhammer." In the briefing room, soldiers, pilots, and engineers surrounded a hologram of a distant star system, their targets marked in Zeka space. "We warp in, hit their forward base," Crawford said, meeting their eyes. "Show the Zeka that humans retaliate." Heads nodded, charged with purpose. Crawford's jaw firm, eyes reflecting the star chart's glow. "We end this threat," he said. "Show the galaxy humanity as a force." A tech entered coordinates. Screens showed ships aligning to jump. Operation Starhammer commenced. The room echoed boots and voices running drills. Earth's finest, grease-stained engineers and sharp-eyed soldiers, all had trained through countless simulations for Operation Starhammer. Crawford watched them, gaze intense. He'd hand-picked them all for skill and focus. His voice stayed firm as he barked orders, demanding discipline for the days ahead. Ava's fingers flew across keyboards, calibrating the new warp drive tech. It hummed, promising speed and stealth. She'd made sure they could jump right to the Zeka's door. An alien ally, newly freed from Zeka rule, gave them intel. Maps, routes, details. They pored over holograms, memorizing the enemy base. "You know what's at stake," Crawford said, voice low. The soldiers felt his words in their chests. They knew and were ready. Reports came as they prepared. The Zeka fleet had changed course, engines flaring at the edge of sensors. A new attack. A fake. Crawford tucked the question away for later. First, they had a job. The warp drive spun up, bending reality as they slipped through space. They emerged in silence, a cold, dead void housing the Zeka base. Scanners swept, no alarms sounded. Ghosts here. Crawford led the way, movements quiet as death. They floated past deadly mines that hung in the black void. Their first target loomed, a nest of sensors watching the void. Crawford planted charges, the team covering his back. They pulled back to safety, and the base went dark, sensors exploding into fire and debris. The base's outer defenses came into view, programmed turrets. Challenge dodged, Crawford's team flowed through like water, finding the path of least resistance. Inside, the silence pressed down. Crawford signaled orders, the team splitting off. Shapes moved, not Zeka, not human. AI killbots, pinpoint accurate, but the team was ready. Engineers scrambled the AI with jammers. Soldiers ducked and wove through gunfire, precision shots taking out the bots. Crawford stood with his team, firing and moving with ease. They advanced, crippling more AI, pushing into the base's heart. Earth's blade, cutting deep. The mission was clear: cripple the Zeka base. Show the galaxy that humanity would not cower. Starhammer was more than an attack. It was a message. The Zeka base felt like a maze of moving metal parts and death. Red and green lights blinked from the many machines filling the place. It was built for efficiency, not comfort. Robot sentries stood guard, ready to kill any intruders. We moved in formation, going deeper into enemy ground. Plasma shots screamed past as we shot at the robots. Their aim stayed true as they fired back. We shot them down, their metal bodies slamming the floor. But more kept coming to replace them. Our team shrank as bullets and mines found Johnson and Patel. They fought bravely until the end. We pushed to the key spots Crawford had picked out. Harper put explosives on the cold metal walls. Soft beeps said they were set to blow. We had little time left. The longer we stayed, the less chance we had of getting out alive. We had to hit fast and escape faster. An arena of suffering suddenly appeared amid the steel hallways. Aliens labored under Zeka whips, their cries echoing. Some had too many eyes, some had none. Their screams held endless pain and lost hope. Crawford froze, thinking hard. "We can't abandon them," he said firmly. His voice cut through the machine hum like a knife. The choice was made. We fired at the Zeka masters, surprising them. Chains broke and cages opened. We yelled to the prisoners, "Run! Follow us if you want to live." They ran without hesitation. The freed prisoners found new strength. They used claws, tentacles, anything to defy their captors. They charged forward, a tide of rage and desperation. We were no longer infiltrators, but rebels. Together we attacked the command center, humanity and aliens side by side. Zeka fell, their shells cracking under our onslaught. Crawford led the battle, firing and commanding. The first explosion hit as the final charge was set. Destruction tore through the base. The ground shook and the ceiling crumbled. We all ran for the exit and for freedom. We raced through collapsing halls, jumping over yawning cracks. Smoke and dust choked the air. The base groaned, about to die. Our ships idled, rumbling and promising escape. We crowded in, frantic to survive. Debris battered the ships as we pulled away from the dying Barsi. The pilots kept steady hands on the controls, even as their hearts pounded. The base imploded behind us. Operation Starhammer had succeeded, striking a blow for Earth's determination and for freedom from oppression. As the wreckage faded, a new alliance was forged between soldiers and former slaves, ready for the next fight. The stars streaked across the cockpit window. The engines rumbled. Every face looked tense. Then the klaxons blared as the warning lights flashed red. Zeka ships followed close behind in warp space. "Steady now," Crawford said sharply. His hands flew across the console, steering towards an asteroid field spinning silently in the void. The Zeka matched every turn, dodging rocks and dust clouds. Engines whined and metal groaned. It was a deadly dance between the asteroids. One slip meant death. The navigator's voice crackled over the comm. "Warp drives overheating." Crawford checked the console readout. Not good. The coils were maxed out, and the shields draining fast. He made the call. "Cut power to non-essentials. Set a course away from Earth," he ordered. "We'll lead them on a chase." The ships veered, leaving Earth's path open. Ava's code activated, hiding the fleet in digital stealth. The Zeka scanners searched but found nothing. From the back, a freed slave spoke up over the noise. Eager, she shared secrets only she knew of the Zeka. "Their empire is vast," she said, "but weak in the outer systems." Crawford listened closely as he dodged more enemy fire. He tucked away every detail for later. Another turn, another asteroid. The Zeka kept firing. A beam grazed the hull, alarms screaming. Damage reports flooded the comms. It was clear the chase would be their ruin. Crawford's jaw tightened. He flicked a switch, silencing the alarms. "We can't outlast them," he said sharply. "Now or never." He eyed the star map. "Set course for Deneb. We'll make our stand there." The battered ships aligned in defiance to face the Zeka. The pursuers closed in, guns glowing with threat. "Fire on my mark," Crawford boomed. The team waited, breathless, fingers on triggers. Crawford watched and waited for the exact moment. "Now!" he cracked like a whip. The weapons blazed, shredding the void. The Zeka ships twisted and turned to evade, but Crawford's aim held true. An enemy ship exploded in a blossom of fire. The battle raged, deadly bursts lighting up space. Ships spun and wove, firing constantly. Each hit on Crawford's shields shuddered through the fleet. In the heat of battle, a console sparked and a screen went dark. Still, Crawford's fleet fought on, wills unbroken. One by one, the Zeka ships faltered and fell until silence reclaimed space. Breathing hard, Crawford surveyed the damage. His ship was scarred and wounded by war, but they had won. The crew exhaled in relief and triumph in the stale bridge air. "We've done it," Crawford said, grim smile on his face. "Now let's get home and end this war." Crawford's ship landed on the tarmac. His boots hit the ground. Crowds of people cheered. Some held up handmade signs praising him. Politicians standing off to the side looked worried. Ava firmly shook his hand first. Her eyes showed what they had been through. "Good job," she said, strong and clear. "Let's get to work," Crawford replied. "Ease on the crowd." Inside, screens showed the rescued aliens. Data streamed next to Ava's fast typing. She took in their words and stories. She used their knowledge to protect Earth. In the command room, Crawford faced the leaders. They sat tense, ready to argue. He stood firm. His stance showed his rank and status. "We can't trust the silence," he said. "It's the calm before the storm." The table held different views. Some faces wore the scars of war. They wanted to end the fighting. Others looked stern, unwilling to yield. Earth Command's leader finally spoke. "Find out if peace is possible," he told Crawford. Crawford's jaw tightened as he nodded. He left with new weight on him. He turned to the aliens they had freed. "Help us understand them," he motioned to the stars. "Help us find peace or strength to resist." Whispers filled the halls as Crawford's call spread. Plans were made. Soldiers met creatures they never imagined as friends. Each meeting made the uneasy waiting worse. Satellites above now had alien wisdom. Ava led the upgrades. Her fingers flew on the controls. Her face showed pure focus. Each new defense was a note in the symphony protecting their home. Even so, new reports brought shadows. Crawford stood in the dim situation room. He stared at the map showing the huge Zeka fleet near the colonies. He turned to Ava beside him. Her eyes reflected the grim news. "We need to be ready," he said hard. "We will be," Ava replied without pause. They returned to their tasks, urgent to defend Earth against the unknown future. The meeting room was huge. The diplomats' shoes clicked and echoed on the stone floor. Humans on one side, scaly Zeka on the other. Both sides stood facing each other under the room's bright, fake sun. Crawford walked to the humans' table. He kept his eyes locked on the Zeka leader. The Zeka's scales shone. Its eyes were narrow slits, waiting. The meeting started with politeness as each side introduced themselves. But when the Zeka spoke, Crawford's jaw clenched tight. The Zeka demanded Earth surrenderland and weapons, a clear threat. "No," Crawford said loud in the silent room. "We won't give up arms. We won't bow. Earth is strong." The human side reacted. Some nodded, approving. Others gripped their chairs, nervous. The bird and lizard aliens spoke next. They told old stories of empires the Zeka built and destroyed, of dead worlds left barren by their demands. The room grew tense. An agreement now seemed unlikely. The Zeka stared hard at the stubborn humans. Crawford got an alert on his wrist comm. He read it quickly. His body tensed up. The Zeka ships weren't lost. Their target was Earth's undefended industrial sector, a sneak attack. Crawford shoved his chair back loud on the stone floor. "We're done here," he said, voice steady and booming. "You preach peace but plan a sneak attack. Earth won't tolerate this betrayal." The Zeka delegation rose, hissing, but Crawford didn't wait for their reply. "Attack us, and you'll regret it," he warned. "Earth will strike back full force." Crawford turned and strode out, the human group following him. His return to Earth was urgent, to prepare defenses for the battle they hoped to avoid, but were ready to face. On Earth, people moved with purpose. Some filled sandbags, others stocked shelters. Screens flashed updates. Parents whispered tales of brave soldiers as children huddled close. When Crawford stepped off the ship, it wasn't just a man arriving. It was the embodiment of human toughness walking among them. His presence fired up their efforts. Workers hurried. Officers barked orders louder. Every talk, every rushed plan held the weight of what was coming. Earth would not be surprised. They stood together, ready to protect their home against the Zeka storm. Crawford stared at the grey sky, stretching his military uniform across his broad shoulders, rank insignias sharp. His face was hard as steel as he clasped his hands behind his back. Thrumming thrusters cut the silence as Earth's defense ships appeared. "Check gear and prepare to move out," Crawford said, his voice cutting through the roar. The troops saluted, a wash of green and black on the concrete. He walked to the command center, boots cracking out his approach. Ava was there, pointing to holograms where new railguns took shape, ready to spit hellfire at the sky. "Targeting synced to satellites," she said, without hiding her urgency, "ready to blast any threat." Crawford scanned the screens and nodded. "The AI interceptors?" "Deploying now," she replied, hands dancing on the controls. "They'll swat the Zeka pods before atmosphere." The sky flickered with interceptors, sleek ships that pounced on the alien assault. Fire and shrapnel burst as metal clashed. Crawford watched explosions dot the once clear sky, tightening his jaw. The threat loomed, now tangible, no longer just data. In the cities, the sounds of war erupted as buildings became bunkers and streets became trenches. People filled sandbags, stacking barricades. Soldiers readied weapons, patrolling the makeshift walls. Rumbling artillery echoed from afar. Armored troops wove through buildings, silent and swift, promises of resistance. Then the ground shook as pods smashed down, cracked open, spilled insect-faced Zeka. The invasion, here and now. "Use caution," Crawford barked to the teams. "Alleys and subways. Hit and fade." Guns chattered in controlled bursts as humanity answered the call. Explosions collapsed corners into graves. The city rose against the invasion. Confusion marked the Zeka as their numbers fell. Their advance staggered under humanity's will. Crawford stayed central, a steady voice on comms shifting troops and data amid the storm. Ava beside him, a rock amid the churn. Days and nights blurred under burning wreckage and screen glow. Their bond deepened, a bulwark against the onslaught. "We'll endure this," Crawford said, meeting Ava's eyes. His voice allowed no doubts, only certainty for her, for Earth, for their stand. The planet strained under war's weight, but its people stood firm, fighting not just to endure, but to reclaim the future. The ground shook as artillery fire hammered the trenches outside Chicago. The rattle of rifles and thud of pulse cannons filled the air. Sweat and dirt covered the defenders' faces as they scrambled to shoot back. Major Crawford stood on an overpass, now a command post. He peered through binoculars. His troops moved through ruined buildings, streets, now war zones. His voice crackled over radios, directing teams to flank the advancing enemy. "Hit their left wing, Bravo," he barked. "More rockets on that front line, Charlie." His orders translated to swift counterattacks on the ground. A squad rushed through rubble, flanking the enemy, hammering a defense post. Grenades exploded, blasting holes in their formation. Human troops surged forward, raw courage against cold efficiency. In orbit, Ava commanded a space battle. Cargo ships bristled with makeshift cannons and missiles. She spoke calmly into her headset, despite the chaos. "Lead those frigates closer, then hit them with everything," she said, eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield. On the streets, defiance and gunpowder filled the air. Civilians turned soldiers held their ground. A barber wielded his shotgun with precision. A teacher directed her platoon with determination. Their will to fight was unyielding. Each fallen enemy brought them closer to reclaiming their lives. Even those far from the fighting contributed, welding armor, filling sandbags, patching the wounded. Across the galaxy, alien species watched and learned. Earth's unbreakable spirit under siege sparked whispers on distant worlds. The oppressed plotted rebellions against their overlords. The turning point came. A ragtag fleet pushed through the blockade with vital supplies. Their arrival sparked cheers among the human ranks, reviving battle-weary bodies. In the thick of it, soldiers dragged a high-ranking enemy from a downed ship. "Get information, whatever it takes," Crawford said urgently. The prisoner remained silent, eyes betraying nothing. The interrogation began in a bunker, shielded from above. The alien finally spoke under pressure. "Weak points in our formation," it hissed reluctantly. Intelligence officers exchanged purposeful glances, transmitting the vulnerabilities. Every revealed secret was a thread, woven into the resistance from burning cities to frigid space battles. Crawford watched the night sky, ships engaged in a celestial dance, a reminder they fought everywhere, for every inch. The interrogation room's sterile light gleamed off the steel walls. Ava stood firm before the captured Zeka commander, its dark, narrow eyes fixed on her as she flipped through the data on her tablet. She tapped the screen, finding a network of supply lines and bases, the lifeblood of their war machine. She tightened her lips. "Time to starve the beast," she murmured. Major Crawford watched through the one-way mirror. He traced the glowing lines on the map she'd put on the wall, turned and met her eyes through the glass as she deactivated it. Her subtle nod said the plan was clear. In the hangar, engines hummed with power. Human and alien pilots flanked Crawford. Black unmarked combat suits hid their faces, just elites ready to dance through enemy fire. He stepped on a cargo crate and scanned their focused faces. "Hit fast, hit hard, vanish," he stated. His voice cut through the noise. "Punch holes in their lines. Pull out before they lock on. No heroics. We're the scalpel, not the hammer." The pilots nodded and strode to their ships. Engines roared as the hangar opened to cold space. The ships slipped into the black void like ghosts. The stars watched silently. Across space, Zeka bases bloomed like tumors rooted to the black. Crawford's strike ships clipped them with bursts of precision fire. Lasers sliced annihilation across hulls and supply docks. They vanished back into the dark, leaving chaos. On Earth, once enslaved species stood with humans in a grand hall. Crawford's voice filled the room from screens on the walls. They displayed the coming grand assault. Voices murmured in countless languages, united in cause. "We stand together," Crawford declared. "The Zeka pushed. We push back. Harder." In space, Zeka ships grouped, enraged engines flaring. They advanced in a tightening noose, blotting out stars, approaching doom. But Crawford's eyes were cold stone on his flagship's bridge. Ava's fingers danced over displays, anticipating. "Decoy squadron ready," she said. "On my signal," he replied, waiting as the enemy approached. Targeting systems locked on. The standoff stretched taut. Crawford dropped his hand. "Now!" Ships broke and streaked out with false signatures. The Zeka took the bait, firing storms at empty ships and illusions. As confusion spread, Crawford's voice rang clearly. "Full fleet, advance!" The grand fleet of a dozen worlds surged forward. Their fire tore Zeka lines. Their formation buckled against the assault. The resilient Zeka shields flickered under the sustained barrage. But the tide had turned. Earth and her allies pressed on, unrelenting. The black space between stars filled with the song of a united front, of engines and guns, defiant hope against defeat's spectre. Crawford led the dance, thrusting, parrying masterfully. Galactic chess on a board of light and void. As ships clashed and Earth's defenders bore down, humanity's heart burned bright and fierce. Together with allies, they forged a future from war's crucible. Saturn's massive striped sphere hung over the fleet, cold and dark. Inside the ships, crews readied for battle in the planet's shadow. On the flagship bridge, Commander Crawford paced. His eyes scanned the screens that lit up his crew's faces. Fast reports came in, sensor sweeps, formations, logistics. Crawford gave clipped commands and nods to each one. "Keep those sensors tight, 10-second sweep," he said. Ava's urgent voice crackled in Crawford's earpiece. "Defense matrix is online. Asteroids are in play." The bridge crew stared at the main screen. The matrix simulation showed chunks of rock and ice redirected by thrusters around the fleet, a bold gambit that could shield them. In the blackness, the Zika arrived in a flash of light. Their angular, bristling ships surged and opened fire. Barrages of energy and missiles met in space as the fleet returned fire. The battle raged amid ice and stone. Asteroid shards pelted both sides with each impact. Pilots maneuvered precisely between shots and debris. "Use the rocks, hit and run," Crawford told the wings, his voice calm. The fighters dipped and dove through the cover. One Zeka ship, struck by a shot an asteroid, spiraled out of place, a chance to gather intelligence. "Hawk Squadron, with me. We're taking that ship," Crawford ordered, moving to the hangar bay. Crawford's team raced to the shuttle, weapons ready and minds sharp. The shuttle lurched from the flagship and coasted by stealth to the crippled Zeka ship. The violent, shuddering docking reverberated through the shuttle. Crawford breached first, sweeping through dim corridors. Resistance was light, the crew still reeling. The bridge was taken quickly, operators seized. Crawford watched his techs download the data. "What do we have?" he asked. "Commander, this is gold," a tech said. "Supply lines, command chains, communications, it's all here. They're fractured, sir. Our resistance is working." Crawford studied the streaming information, seeing the cracks within the Empire. A plan formed in his sharp mind. Back on the flagship, Crawford shared the findings. "The Zeka are divided. We'll exploit this. Get me the Allied commanders," he said. In a Saturn War Council, fierce commander faces appeared on screen. Crawford outlined the offensive. Hit bases and fleets. Use infighting against them. "Keep up the pressure, keep them scrambling, then we take the fight to their door," Crawford said, his strategy clear. The commanders nodded and prepared. The battered but unbroken fleet secured Saturn. Their ships formed a powerful backdrop against the planet's rings, a statement of human will. Crawford stared at the dark space ahead. This was humanity, once deemed too weak, now a force of courage ready to become the tide itself. The Alliance fleet hung there in space over Neptune's blue globe. Shuttles linked warships. Ava ran system checks at her console, lights flickering green. "Warp drives ready," she said. Crawford scanned his crew's faces, etched with grit. He tapped the console, sending the order. Voices hushed, engines hummed. Ships jumped to warp in shimmering blurs. Stars stretched to streaks before the black swallowed them. Back home, countdowns filled town squares. Living rooms flashed the fleet disappearing. Parents clutched their young, eyes wide in fear and awe. The fleet ghosted into Zeka space. Red alerts blared. The defense web scrambled. Ships scattered without orders. "Don't let them group," Crawford said over comms. Fighting erupted. Beams crossed the void in silence but for clipped reports and orders. Ships spun and aimed, blooms of muted explosions as shields burst and hulls cracked. Crawford watched the fray, each move met with countermove. "Delta, support Echo advance. Hold position, Alpha. Cover fire on my mark." The bridge shook with nearby hits. Ava kept her hand steady, guiding Alliance firepower. Ease fixed a heed. Planets emerged. Cries of freedom rose. Gates opened on moons and worlds. Banners fell. Freed people staggered out, blinking at lost sunlight. They yelled thanks, a chorus of liberty. Crawford's words spread. Fuel for revolution. "Our spirit is the fire that lights the dark," he boomed. Hangars and halls ignited with purpose. The fleet surged onward, leaving freed worlds spinning behind, pushing coreward. More clashes, more planets liberated. The Zeka reeled in retreat. In battle's cost etched on survivors' faces, the silence for the lost. Still momentum built in each hard-won fight, a rising tide threatening to drown the crumbling empire. Crawford's gaze fixed ahead, the fight a living tapestry. the fates of planets hanging on each command given. Crawford looked at the digital maps on the hollow table. They were covered in red and blue dots, showing the supply routes across star systems. The routes looked stretched too far, with lines crisscrossing like veins. His finger traced one thin line where skirmishes happened a lot. Ava stared at her screen filled with numbers. She glanced at Crawford. A silent talk passed between them. "Fuel is low at Sigma Base. Changing the tanker route," she said in a steady voice. But she looked tired around the eyes. Outside, the fighting went on. Alliance troops in armor marched on the alien dirt under unfamiliar colored skies. Each win was hard, testing their guts and will. New allies from planets sent help, meaning more were against the enemy. Crawford watched from the ship as carriers spilled out many types of beings with weapons ready. The interrogation room felt heavy. The tall Zeka sat and broke the silence with a hiss. "The Empire is split. We offer a ceasefire," it said, twitching its antennae nervously. Crawford stood with arms folded, face blank. He glanced at the blinking red surveillance camera, knowing his people watched for what to do. Talks fired up in rooms and halls. Human and alien leaders argued if they could trust the prisoner. "Could be a trick," one officer said. A younger soldier said back, "Or our chance for peace." Crawford went to his quarters, the choice weighing on his stiff posture. Ava followed, her hand brushing his back, comforting him. They stood at the window, looking at the stars they fought through. "Peace or trap?" Ava asked. Crawford watched a star disappear behind a passing cruiser. "Can't drop our guard. Not yet," he replied, meeting her eyes. She nodded, knowing the stakes. At dawn, with long shadows from the twin suns, Crawford spoke in the full briefing room. "We'll look at the ceasefire, but stay ready," he said. "We can't forget why we fight." Outside, the war continued. Soldiers crouched behind barriers, guns ready, whispering the new word, ceasefire. It passed through the lines, a current of cautious hope, but their eyes watched the horizon for enemy ships, hands gripping rifles tighter. Crawford alone could tip the scale and shape the future. His choices here among tired warriors would echo through the galaxy. Crawford strode down the hall, his boots clanking on the metal floor. He headed to the war room in Camp Armstrong. Holograms of maps floated over the table, dotted with symbols for units and defenses. Earth and space territory hung in the air. Ava stood at the table, fingers dancing over the keypad. The screens zoomed in on fortified planets. "Major," she said, eyes glued to the screens, "defense systems boosted on freed colonies. We'll know if the Zeka come calling." Crawford nodded. "Stay ready. The Zeka say peace, but it's hollow, like a house of cards." Ava looked up, gaze steady. "You think they'll cave so easy?" Crawford leaned on the table, scanning the maps. "They're rattled but cornered beasts bite. I won't risk Earth on their word alone." The door hissed open. An aide entered and saluted. "Sir, the Zeka sent terms for the ceasefire." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "And?" The aide swallowed. "They mentioned reparations and freeing slaves, but it's vague." Crawford exhaled sharply. "Vague is useless. Get me their flagship. We speak leader to leader." The aide nodded and left. Ava stayed silent, hands poised over the controls. Crawford turned to her. "I want full disclosure from them. No hidden agendas or secret deals. If they want peace, it must guarantee safety for all." Ava nodded, her face showing concern and trust. "Make sure we don't pay for their definition of peace. Trust me, Ava. Any double dealing and we hit them hard. I won't gamble Earth's future on their honor." Crawford's voice rang firm as the steel walls. Deep hums vibrated the floor as defense systems ran checks. Screens flickered data showing a planet on high alert. Officers moved with purpose, ready to defend Earth. Outside, people scanned the sky. Children played at dogfights with toy ships. Parents held hands, anxiety and hope in their eyes. All wanted peace, but stayed vigilant, unwilling to surrender for a promise. In the war room, the heavy door sealed Crawford in. He placed his hand on the communicator, ready to face the Zeka leaders. His mind raced with plans to protect Earth. "This call decides the fate of millions," Crawford muttered. "Let's see if the Zeka understand the price of betrayal." The galaxy held its breath as Crawford made the call. Earth's defiance and strength carried in the man who dared demand peace on human terms. The conference room was cold and bare, its metal walls stripped of decoration. Only stark function remained. Surveillance swept every corner. Earth's best soldiers guarded each entrance, outfitted for combat, rifles ready. Ava stood with Major Crawford, her focus on the display as the Zeka diplomats approached it. Her hands hovered over countermeasures. Prepared to act if talks went bad, Crawford glanced at her, acknowledging her skills before facing the steel table again. The door he said open. Zeka diplomats entered on clicking legs. Their exoskeletons tapped the floor in the sterile room. Mandibles worked in tense silence. Crawford didn't stand as they sat. Tension filled the air. Withdrawal, sovereignty, and tribunal, Crawford stated in a flat voice. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them. The Zeka shifted, antennae twitching, mandibles grinding fury, but desperation showed in their eyes. We accept, one said, voice echoing off cold metal walls. Crawford barely nodded. We will hold you to it. Ava. Ava stepped up with a datapad. My team oversees disarmament. We guarantee compliance, she said firmly, allowing no disagreement. With the armistice signed, crowds poured into streets on freed worlds. Their triumphant cheers filled space. Ava led her team to the first Zeka base. Her soldiers followed, weapons ready, watching for danger. Zeka troops stood aside as humans dismantled their arsenal piece by piece. Alone in command, Crawford watched Ava's progress. Officers moved around him, but his thoughts were distant. Peace for now, but at what cost? He turned to the stars, witnesses to war. His hand touched the viewport glass, resolve firm as the day war began. The outpost was a maze of steel and wire, corridors twisted under harsh lights that glinted off the metal walls. Ava moved through the narrow paths with her Earth Alliance team. Her armored fingers touched old weapon systems, now useless junk. She catalogued them. Sweat beaded on her forehead from focus, not tiredness. Her breath stayed calm, eyes sharp behind her visor. Here, a tech called. His voice echoed down the corridor. Ava followed the sound. Her boots thumped the floor with each step. They found a sealed room. The door was open a crack. Warning signs in alien writing covered it. Ava's tech, Jackson, worked the panel. Wires and lights flashed under his hands. The door hissed as it opened. Stale air gushed out. The room was freezing, bone cold. Vials lined the walls. Each had labels with DNA codes. The team's breath fogged in the icy air. They scanned the vials. The results chilled them more than the cold. This is a bioweapon, Ava said. Her voice was steady and hard. She turned a vial in the light. Targeted, lethal. She radioed Crawford. We've got a problem, she began. Her report was clear and crisp. Crawford listened in the command center. His jaw tightened, hands clenched behind his back. Screens blinked updates, but his focus was only on Ava's voice. A targeted bioweapon, he pressed. You're sure? Yes, Major, it's here, against the rules, Ava replied. The find was serious in her tone. Crawford called the aliens on a secure line. One appeared on screen. It reflected the dim light with its shell. We found a bioweapon at your base, Crawford stated. Not a question, a fact. The alien clicked and hissed. Its parts flared with worry. Rogue group not approved, it claimed. Its antennae twitched. Crawford's lips thinned to a line. Rogue or not, it breaks the rules. We need access to all records and a defense agreement for Earth. Back at the base, Ava's team packed the vials carefully. Each one was tagged for destruction. No one talked much. What they'd found was heavy. They brought the vials to the disposal, watched them dissolve to nothing on the screens. Crawford spoke firmly to the gathered aliens. We found a weapon against life, but together we dealt with it. Remember, united, we ended war. United, we stand despite the dark fears. Murmurs of agreement echoed in the room. The aliens nodded, looking to Crawford as a leader. His words held together their fragile union. It wasn't just talk. After, the pact got signed. Earth and the aliens marked the paper. Promises to defend each other. Crawford watched the aliens sign. Their marks meant more than ink. Their fate now bound to humanity's. Earth would stay alert, but for now there was peace, precarious on the edge of trust. Skeletons of steel buildings stood bare across the dead planet. Workers swarmed the wreckage like ants. Ava wore a dirt-smeared visor and gloves with rolled-up sleeves as she passed plans to the foreman. The tablet glowed with deep underground reactors and pipes that would withstand anything now. "These go deep," she said, pointing at the screen. The bulky foreman nodded, his calloused hands carefully holding the promise of tomorrow. Away from the noise, Crawford watched. His simple clothes were a diplomat's uniform now, no medals on his chest. Representatives faced him with skeptical faces lined from hard years. A tall woman stepped forward, arms crossed. "Major, we didn't win freedom to get a new ruler," she said clearly. Crawford met her gaze. "I know, I'm here to offer choices, not rules." He passed a datapad. Land, votes, it's all there. Just the start. They huddled around the screen, wary, then nodding with approval. At the wreckage, Ava crouched by a jagged pylon sharp enough to cut. Fresh marks surrounded it. Sabotage. She tapped her earpiece. "Security Grid 6. Find who did this." Crawford paced the command center. Maps flashed new borders and routes on the walls. His finger stopped on a red spot. Time for a talk. He tapped his comm. "I need a ship to these coordinates." The fringe world's air was tense. Voices shouted in the dry wind as Crawford stepped off the ramp, hands empty and open. A fierce woman cut through the crowd and stopped in front of him. "You think words will quell us, Major?" Crawford shook his head. "No, I'm here to listen, to find a path together." Hours passed with rizzing and falling voices. Crawford spoke of shared rule, not conquest. Among the stars, the alliance formed. Mixed faces worked together, rebuilding what was lost. Ava watched over it all from a high platform, steady against the progress. The machinery's hum and diverse chatter filled the air. In his quarters, Crawford studied the reports. Small wins towards something greater. He leaned back, eyes closing for just a moment. "Peace is the tougher war," he murmured. But gazing at the unity of purpose, he knew it was worth it. The capital's grand plaza filled with people for the first Liberation Day. Flags whipped in the wind. Ava stood among the crowd in her uniform with engineering insignia. She watched Major Crawford climb onto the dais in a well-fitted suit, but his eyes still showed the war. "Today marks a year of peace, rebuilding together what we bravely fought for," Crawford's voice carried. "Victory was not just on battlefields, but in spirit. It lives on in the worlds we freed and lives we saved." Heads nodded, eyes watered. Ava stepped up with her datapad. She showed holographic monument plans, orbiting Earth. "This tribute reminds us of those not here today," she said, tapping the pad. Ghostly steel and light appeared, showing unity. A blast cracked applause, energy sizzling past Crawford, burning the podium. Gasps rippled. Crawford ducked behind the dais as security swarmed, guns ready. They tackled an assassin, scales dulled by oppression. The crowd parted, some afraid, some angry. The assassin struggled, weapon falling. Crawford rose, jacket adjusted, waving off medics. Chaos filled the plaza, but his voice was clear. "This act won't define us. We're better than the hatred behind this violence." The zealot assassin was dragged away, eyes fevered. Crawford watched the sunset cast long shadows. Later, Crawford and Ava reviewed in a quiet room. 1 year, yet we face this," he mused, hands behind his back. "It shows we have more work, healing wounds below the surface." Ava watched night creep over the city. "We'll need programs, outreach, to rebuild minds, not just cities." "We will. Each soul lost to darkness dims our light. Let's bring them back." They shared a knowing glance. The fight for peace never ends, but they were ready to face it together. Crawford stepped on broken rocks as he walked through what was left of a city. Rusted steel and chipped concrete covered the ground where buildings once stood tall. He saw kids' eyes watching him from shelters made of scraps. They had never seen an earthling before. He brushed his hand against a cold metal beam that was still standing from what used to be a skyscraper. He noticed the scared and tired looks on the faces around him. Behind Crawford, Ava's building crew drilled into the ground with loud machines. They were starting to put up a new school, one that would stand above the rest of the city. It promised the people a better life than they had now. The workers yelled instructions over the noise. as they used lasers and plasma to cut precise shapes. Crawford stepped up onto a platform to speak to the crowd that had gathered around him. His voice carried over the construction noise. "We're here to help you build better lives, not just new building," he told them. "The PCIEI will give you the tools, education, and jobs you need. No child here will feel helpless again." His translator device let the people understand him in their own languages. Some looked unsure since leaders had lied to them before. But others, especially the young who hadn't seen much war, looked at Crawford with the first bits of hope. One boy, no older than 10, stepped up and offered a handshake, a sign of peace. Crawford shook his hand. In that small action, a promise was made between them. In another part of the city, Ava worked with engineers in a new dome built to protect crops. They floated, assembling water systems vital for the plants and for their own survival. The dome hummed to life as oxygen generators sputtered on, turning carbon dioxide into breathable air. Drops of sweat floated away from Ava's face, but she kept focused on the see-through pipes, watching clean water flow for the first time. She turned to a screen and reported to Crawford. "Major, we've hit water. The farm is ready. This place will feed thousands soon," she said, sounding sure of their progress. Back on Earth, Crawford stood firm before politicians and survivors as he talked about the importance of rebuilding. "The PCIEI is more than a project. It's our duty," he said. "Every hand offered to help pulls us further from the hatreds of the past." He met each person's gaze and shook their hands. Some grabbed his tightly, while others hesitated, the betrayals of the past still too fresh. Crawford understood. Time would heal what words could not. In the following weeks, learning centers and factories rose from the rubble. Trade grew between worlds. Crawford watched a shuttle take off, its cargo bay holding the first exports from the freed world. Proof of their progress and resilience. Crawford and Ava, united in a cause greater than any conflict, continued on. In boardrooms and empty fields, they planted seeds of trust, and with them the future grew, one where the war was just a memory, and the galaxy stood on the edge of lasting peace rather than destruction. Crawford stood in front of the Galactic Council. The hum of different voices filled the large room. His words echoed off the high-tech walls as he spoke to the council. Faces of humans and aliens looked at him. Some seemed worried, others seemed hopeful. Crawford talked about what Earth had to offer. "Here I show you Earth's records. You'll see we work hard. We want to cooperate, not fight," he said. Crawford touched a screen. Lots of data appeared above the council members' heads. Everyone went quiet. They wanted to understand the information. The room smelled like electricity and worry. Ava watched Crawford from the back of the room. She had her arms crossed. Her being there showed Earth supported its allies. She had prepared for this moment. Now Crawford carried the responsibility. Screens around the room lit up. The council members looked through the data. They whispered as they saw times when Earth messed up. But the data also showed all the good Earth had done. It showed times of bravery and sacrifice. It showed Earth fought not just for itself, but for others too. The council members glanced at each other. Their suspicion changed to something softer. One by one they nodded. They saw Earth had tried to be fair. A Graythend delegate stood up. Its tentacles moved in a way that showed respect. "We see you've told the truth," it said in a deep voice. "The evidence shows fairness. It shows effort for balance in hard times." Crawford bowed his head. "It's not just about Earth," he said. "It's about all of us learning together." In the next days, Ava's research group became important for cooperation. Beings from the galaxy met at Ava's headquarters. Scientists and engineers shared ideas and were amazed by each other's knowledge. The labs were filled with the sounds of machines and the smell of hot solder. Ava walked among them as a leader. "Here's the design for power converters," she said. A glowing blueprint appeared above the table. Everyone leaned in. Their eyes were wide. The plans would change how energy was made. "Equal distribution to all worlds, no exceptions. This is our first gift to the treaty," Ava said. Everyone approved. Treaties were signed. The Galactic Innovation Treaty marked a shared future. Worlds would share mines and resources. Crawford watched from above. Seeing enemies now working together made him smile, something rare for him. The buzz of activity below him showed a galaxy starting to heal. Ava worked in her lab. Screens covered the walls, flashing complex data. In the center sat a metal ring. It pulsed and made spines shiver. This experiment was unlike any other. Ava leaned in, gazing at the numbers. Her jumpsuit showed long hours of work. "Adjust the frequencies, don't cause another blackout." Ava spoke to a technician. He nodded, turning a dial. The machine's hum grew steady. They were making progress. In the overlook, Crawford watched. He stood with hands behind his back. His eyes narrowed, thinking of what this could mean. His mind created scenarios of discovery. Crawford addressed the gathered officials. He spoke of treading new cosmic paths. Caution and duty, not recklessness, would guide them. Below, Ava's hand hovered over the device. "Start the scan. Let's test our theories," she said. She pressed a button. Glowing light came from the core. The room tensed, waiting. Data filled the screens. They had breached a new dimension. The team celebrated quietly. Their work meant so much. Crawford met with leaders. The setting magnified their grave task. "We must explore carefully," Crawford began. They agreed to create a guiding ethics committee. News spread with curiosity and hope. Crawford's steady leadership calmed concerns. In the lab, Ava clasped hands with her team. Their trust had uncovered new horizons. The day came. A silent ship waited at the dimensional edge. Inside, pioneers strapped in, faces set with purpose. Crawford's voice carried over the comm. He blessed their voyage into the unknown. Ava started the sequence. The ship flashed and roared into new dimensions. Back on Earth, eyes stayed fixed on empty space. Hearts beat with possibility. A new chapter had begun. Crawford looked at the holograms above his desk. Pictures of destroyed buildings and crying families in Zendara. A natural disaster hit them hard. He grabbed a headset, flipping through images. "Briefing, now," he said. The meeting room was packed. Everyone waited for Crawford. The air felt heavy. They were ready to act. Crawford stood up, his face serious. "Bad situation in Zendara. You've seen it. We need to help them," he said. The room was silent, all eyes on Crawford. "It won't be easy. We're already busy. But Earth can handle this. These people need us." He looked around the room. Everyone was committed. "I got help from Tormak and Villan. Ships, supplies, medicine. They owe us. Earth leads now. We won't back down." His words had power. The room moved to act. On Zendara, Ava's team brought order. They moved through crowds, handing out supplies. Shelters went up fast, giving tired survivors shade. Ava watched from above, talking on her earpiece. "This one's ready. Next section," she said, swiping a tablet. Her people worked smoothly. Ava directed them to the next site, steady but sad. The sound of construction drones filled the air. In one day, empty land became a haven. On Earth, Crawford navigated politics, different priorities and interests. He stood firm, making deals and promises. "We help those in need and build a shared future," he told them. Earth became a light for the lost and struggling. Crawford built bonds beyond politics. They meant unity and compassion. The Zendara refugees showed the scars of the universe. But with Crawford and Ava, those scars didn't define them. Instead, they marked a new start, a chapter of healing, and Earth led the way. The rumble of the engine filled the chamber as Ava stepped inside, wearing her IRC uniform. Lights on the console blinked, ready to go. She nodded to the team in their grey uniforms, faces serious. "We start on my mark," Ava said firmly. 3, 2, 1, mark! The ship shook as space folded around it. For a moment, everything stopped. Then streams of raw color blasted out as the ship broke through. The crew grabbed the consoles as the readings went crazy before settling down. Outside was a sea of stars, but the big sight was Earth on the screen. It was their Earth, but different. The lands looked the same, but no defense grid circled it. No one spoke on the bridge. They all stared at the untouched Earth, a world that had known peace, not like theirs. Ava broke the silence, awe in her soft voice, but still commanding. "Start the scans. I want to know this place like home." Teams worked quietly, gathering data on the planet's tech. No war here. Cities were clean, skyways not roads, no ugly defenses like back home. In the room on the orbital platform, Crawford saw the incoming data on the walls. The representatives waited for him to decide. "This changes things," Crawford said grimly. "What we do now is important." He turned to the group. "Limited exchange only. We learn a little, they learn a little, no more until we understand what it means." Murmurs of agreement came, some excited, some worried. The decision was made. They would connect the worlds carefully. On the other Earth, Ava made first contact. Screens lit up with faces like theirs but untouched by conflict. Surprise and caution on both sides, but also curiosity. Ava spoke evenly and clearly, picking her words with care. "We come in peace from a parallel reality to yours. We have much to share and learn. Will you join us in this?" The answer was action, not words. That Earth agreed to open talks. Data started flowing both ways, slow and careful. Images of their sciences, arts, and lives went across. In return, knowledge of defense, unity, and survival beamed back. Crawford watched, a silent guard over the future. In his mind, realities stretched out, each one connected, each connection a choice. And out there, humanity took the first step toward working with others, across not just stars, but worlds. Ava stood in the lab, surrounded by the noise of machines and typing. Strands of glowing data swirled together on a screen, showing discoveries from the other Earth, new formulas, designs, and objects. She turned the image, zooming in. "This changes everything," she said loudly. The room got quiet as everyone looked at her. Humans, aliens, eyes and antennae focused. "They've found cellular healing using quantum physics. Wounds could heal faster, smarter. Every world in our alliance could have this." Doctors and medics across planets trained hard with the new knowledge. Injuries healed quickly, sickness lost power, and lifespans grew longer everywhere. Ava oversaw it all calmly. Meanwhile, Major Crawford paced in a security room lit by cold blue screens. He watched reports of black market goods from the parallel Earth. The exotic items tempted people. "Shut it down now," Crawford growled. He sent orders and agents swung into action, seizing illegal goods, closing secret trade routes, and making arrests. The message was clear. This trade threatened progress and bred corruption. Crawford broadcast on secure channels. "Follow the rules if you trade with them, and speak up about anything shady. We're watching." Ava held classes and workshops. Beings from all worlds came, some doubtful, some eager. She walked them through the complex tech. "With great power comes responsibility. You're the guardians now." After every class, the worlds moved closer together. What were once jealous hands now held the means to advance. Crawford watched the many faces, scarred or wide-eyed, see hope for a better tomorrow. Under them, the two Earths and allies entered an age of shared success, busy trade routes, thriving cities, and peace kept strong. Crawford looked out over flags fluttering in the capital. He stood there, a promise fulfilled. Now knowledge itself brought progress, and exchanging ideas began not an ending, but a new start. Crawford punched buttons on his hologram, sending orders to each station and ship. His face looked hard, a general forced to make choices when there were no good ones. "Get the medical ships to the Alicine belt now," he said. Infection was exploding there. "Priority is containing this outbreak before it spreads to other systems." Down in the lab, Ava and her team rushed to assemble the compact silver treatment units. Their hands moved fast over the smooth metal, checking every seal was tight. One mistake could cost lives. "Double-check everyone," Ava said, inspecting each herself. Perfection mattered. "Unit 14 complete," a tech said. Ava nodded, already focused on the next task. The finished units joined the rows awaiting transport. The ships coordinated now, driven by a shared goal. Jumps through warp space carried supplies grown from Earth's genius, each one a pulse of hope through the galaxy. Crawford watched the aid flow across his hologram while he tapped the arm of his chair nervously. He opened a video feed from the parallel Earth. People in isolation suits hustled, building emergency shelters. "Make sure the test kits reach the hot zones first," Crawford said. "We need information." Yes, sir. First kits are away, the officer replied, eyes on her own screen. Ava watched the sleek ship load with no joy. Success would come when lives were saved. She turned to her team as the final unit was loaded. Our work matters now, she said, meeting each gaze. The tech we send could save someone's father or child. Remember that. The ship rumbled skyward, a silver light streaking toward that other Earth. Weeks passed. Word came back of lives pulled from the edge, communities daring to breathe again. The treatment units were now common, guardians holding vigil. Fast tests brought control back to local leaders. Pride grew in Crawford as each victory came, however small. The fight continued, but the weights felt lighter. The faces in his hologram were the living, gratitude shining from worlds rescued. His decisions had steered the response. In the lab, Ava's team cheered, lifted up in knowing their work had saved lives. Their leader had driven them to innovation beyond imagination. Together, they commanded a galaxy reminded of its strength. The bond between two Earths became more than science, now a testament to the human spirit, to the alliance it created. Major Crawford stood on the deck staring out the viewport. A settler ship punched through the planet's atmosphere. Its engines rumbled, a deep vibration in his chest. "Status on the landings," Crawford barked at the comm officer. "Touchdown successful, sir. No wildlife problems. Air's breathable." Crawford nodded. "Tell the commander we follow the rules." Below, machinery hummed to life. Construction drones latched onto metal, building the first structures. Not just buildings, a promise of a new life. No more exploitation. Ava's teams had already been there, working with the locals. The structures rose from the ground, blending with nature. Careful planting integrated earth flora with local plants. Technology and nature in harmony, powered by the planet itself. "Get Ava whatever she needs. This must work," Crawford said. The weight of history pressed on him. The settlers stepped onto their new home's soil. He saw the galaxy's potential, diverse species, mutual benefit. A new dawn. But not all shared this vision. On a remote station, dissenters rallied. "Not conquerors! This is imperialism!" They waved smeared signs. Crawford understood their fear. History held conquest and subjugation, but humanity now wrote a different story. He addressed them, his words transmitted across space. "I hear you. Open forums for every voice. Our expansion is built on respect, on unity." Negotiations now his battleground, his words as pivotal as any weapon, days filled with dialogue, nights poring over treaties, protecting all. Ava supported him. She ran settler training programs, teaching non-invasive interactions, showed terraforming and recycling advancements, ensuring light footprints. Together they built relationships, an environment of growth and prosperity. Challenges lay ahead, but he faced them. Humans would be known not for ground taken, but for alliances built. Their efforts spread like ripples, each world showing humanity's new path, learning, reaching. Crawford stood firm in the Alliance Council chamber, steel in his voice as he spoke to the restless crowd. The amphitheater filled with reps from many systems and species. A group of militarists in uniform shouted about wanting more weapons, their calls echoing off the walls. "We survived hell before. Do we want to go back?" Crawford's question hung in the air, challenging the noise. "I say no. We've seen enough war. It's time for peace." Voices rose against him, harsh and critical. "Naive," a general barked out. "These treaties won't stop what's out there." Ava stepped up, her course badge glinting in the light. Her calm voice commanded attention. "Diplomacy and trade have taken us further than any fleet. Look at the routes, the exchanges. United, we're stronger than armed." Murmurs of agreement grew louder as more nodded. Ava projected holograms of busy markets, ships passing peacefully, and alien kids in new schools. Crawford seized the moment. The Charter isn't surrender. It's our promise to each other, a shield of trust, not guns. After weeks with Ava, campaigning together, their push for talking resonated. People wanted dialogue, not destruction. On ratification day, the chamber buzzed differently. The vote came and hands rose in favor. Beings across the galaxy gave assent. The Charter passed strongly. Crawford watched old warships change in the yards. Weapons bays became cargo holds and labs. Cannons removed for telescopes and sensors. More than physical, the culture shifted. Curiosity replaced fear. The charter became the foundation, with Ava's rebuilding and Crawford's diplomacy. Together, they led a galaxy exploring stars to connect, not conquer. In the light of shared knowledge, not under dreadnought shadows. Crawford looked out over the united faces. They'd won not just a battle, but set a course for lasting peace. Ava stood beside him, her work the cornerstone of the new age. Beyond the chamber, the galaxy watched. People on countless worlds witnessed the dawn of cooperation, understanding, and human spirit. Ava's boots thudded on the metal floor of the old spaceship drifting in unknown space. Dark halls groaned as her team's lights cut through the black, showing tech strange to their eyes. She brushed dust off a dead console, blew gently, and watched particles dance in her flashlight's beam. This was no normal find. The hull had no markings of known people, a relic from when Earth's ancestors saw stars with naked eyes. She signaled her team with precise fingers. They understood. Care above all else. They had danced this dance before, balancing curiosity and rules. With great care, her engineer Lin linked their tech to the alien controls. A hum vibrated through the ship, its sleeping mind waking up. "It's powering on," Lin said, eyes locked on flickering symbols. Ava leaned in, face tight with focus, as alien words scrolled past. "Translate," she ordered. Their linguist Jamal worked his algorithms, sifting syntax and context. The AI spoke with a voice from the void. "I am Keeper. I hold the history of the Tilan, sailors of space." It told of seekers of knowledge who spoke of stars like family. Ava listened, recorder catching each word. Now was time to preserve, not celebrate. On Earth, Crawford paced in a room washed in the blue glow of screens showing Ava's progress. He watched with hands behind his back. Every bit of data could be a beacon, could lead to an unimagined future. He sent clear orders. "Share the archives. All must benefit from this wisdom." The ship's library held enlightenment. Ava's team found hints of tech beyond them and philosophy of a united cosmos. And within myth and data, the great attractor. Crawford took it in, the vision of a union beyond stars, a group bound by more than gravity. His eyes were steady, his choice made. "We find this great attractor. We explore, we learn. Our future is out there, and we're ready." The team packed up, cargo full of data drives. Ava looked back one last time, no longer just a ship, now a bridge to the past and a gate to the future. Major Crawford stood in the command center, eyes on the hologram. The room buzzed, a space anomaly warped before them. Stars wavered oddly, reality stretched thin. Ava adjusted her invention's dials. The machine hummed, promising discovery. Screens and blinking lights linked to sensors, ready to pierce the veil of the great attractor. "Are the probes ready?" Crawford asked steadily. Ava glanced up. "Yes, ready on your mark." "Launch them!" Crawford nodded. In space, sleek probes shot from the flagship towards the area. Readings transmitted back, fluctuating wildly. The team watched in awe as ghostly structures emerged on screen. Tall monoliths, geometric shapes defying perspective, hinted at an ancient intelligence. Ava worked fast, unraveling secrets. The room grew silent as the fruits of their labor displayed in HD. Crawford broke the silence. "This isn't just discovery, it's responsibility. We must proceed carefully." He turned to his officer. "Arrange a summit. Every allied system must be present. We need to decide this together." The summit met on a neutral platform. Diverse beings from the galaxy gathered, scientists flanking each representative. Curiosity and caution filled the room. Crawford stood at the table. "This cosmic treasure belongs to no single species. The structures pose opportunity and risk." Whispers filled the room. Ava interjected firmly, excited. "The data is clear. The structures caused the erratic region. Study could bring understanding." Murmurs of assent rippled through the dignitaries. A luminescent iridian stood. "We agree. This site must be preserved for all." Crawford nodded. "We'll make it a heritage site for research, with strict oversight, no past recklessness." One by one, all consented. The declaration unified them to honor and protect the great attractor. Ava and Crawford shared a silent nod, cementing their commitment. Together they had guided humanity into a new age of enlightenment. The probes continued their dance around the ancient structures, a testament to humanity's pursuit of knowledge. At the heart stood Crawford and Ava, pioneers of humanity's new dawn. Crawford stood at helm of command center, eyes scanning giant screen mapping space. His fingers tapped commands, watching blips and swirls. Ava was next to him, just as focused. "Movement near edge of zone, unauthorized ships, radicals after anomalies," Ava said. "Visual," Crawford ordered fast. The screen zoomed in on cluster of small ships darting at research vessels. "Radicals after anomalies," Crawford grumbled, mouth firm. He flicked on comms. "Green light, task force, no kills. Capture only, uphold peace charter," he commanded, leaving no room for argument. Ava worked her console fast, coordinating ships around radicals. Calmly sent orders. "Team 1, left flank. Disable engines with EMP nets. Team 2, board disabled ships." Smooth operation unfolded. Bursts of electricity as EMP nets hit. Radical ships powered down adrift. Teams in suits jetted out, capturing radicals easily. Crawford nodded, satisfied. "No casualties," he said. "No casualties," Ava echoed, pride in her voice. She turned back to console, fingers adjusting security net. "Updated protocols in an hour. They won't try this again." Researchers watched from their ship, faces pressed to glass, fear and relief in their eyes, whispered thanks for protection. Later, Crawford solemnly recounted incident to council. "Testament to resolve. Charter, not just words, but living spine of alliance, enforced with care as shown today." He paused, looking across species. "Protected future where curiosity and discovery flourish, not stifled by greed." Council murmured approval, nods from beings. Ava watched, protocols transmitting silently, invisible shield guarding knowledge and peace. The region remained wondrous, beacon of united will. Crawford and Ava forged path in stars, not of war, but understanding, peace their guiding light. Ava's boots clicked sharply against the metal floor as she entered the room. Monitors and screens flickered and glinted, streaming lines of data. A hologram of the galaxy glowed in the center, lit by strands linking each system. Her defense network, online at last. "Status," Ava said sharply, scanning the room. Operators looked up from their screens. "All good, ma'am. Getting alerts from the trade spine already. We're on it," one said. Ava nodded, studying the data. "Send ships to 7-4 Alpha. That route stays open." "Yes, ma'am," came the reply, followed by the rapid clack of keys. Ava turned to the delegates behind her, faces solemn as they watched her command. Above, Crawford observed, satisfied as all eyes followed Ava's orders. He addressed the diplomats around him. "This is more than defense, it's unity. Trade is up, piracy down. Together, we're stronger." Murmured agreement rippled through the group. One delegate spoke. "A new era, Major. Each system can now count on the others." Crawford descended to the main floor, steps strong. "Let's keep the momentum," he said to Ava, loud enough for all to hear. "We stay alert, stay ready. Shared security is our commitment." Ava's wrist device chimed with alerts. "Systems along the Perseus arm are requesting access. They want the benefits too." "Good," Crawford rumbled. "Schedule talks. Every system deserves peace." The delegates joined them, faces hopeful. Ava introduced a young officer who would guide them through the details. Crawford turned back to the hologram, watching new strands form as more joined. He met Ava's gaze. "We did it. A hub of diplomacy, just like we dreamed." Ava surveyed the room. "And we'll keep pushing forward. The galaxy needs us to." They focused again on the task, Ava walking the group through the particulars. Crawford watched, knowing this system was more than defense. It was a new chapter, woven from unity. Major Crawford's voice boomed through the assembly hall. He stood firm, with a giant screen flashing behind him. Faces stared back expectantly, human and alien alike. "We're at a turning point," Crawford said, urgent and clear. "Our expansion brought wealth, but now our planets face threat from that success." The screen flickered, showing rivers choked with garbage and crops drying to dust. skies once crystal now greyed. Ava tapped her pad, replacing the stark images with green solutions, solar panels, wind turbines, water purifiers. "See here?" Ava took the stage, knowledge powering her voice. "We can upgrade what we have, build better. Every being in this galaxy deserves that." Murmurs filled the room as delegates turned to each other, reflecting on their homeworlds fading on screen. Ava showed them possibility, cleaner, sustainable living. "Change is hard, but progress always is," Crawford continued. "Our accord lays the foundation for responsible resource use, adopting green technology everywhere." Some delegates shook their heads, industry giants whispering apprehensively. Crawford met their gazes, unspoken challenge in his eyes. "You think of today's profits, but what of tomorrow?" he pressed. "Will markets exist when resources run out, when damage is permanent?" Crawford and Ava moved through the crowd, her projector throwing real-time pollution stats and energy-efficient simulations as they walked. "You have the power to change this," Ava said, staring unwaveringly into a leading industrialist's eyes. "Cut emissions, clear the skies, give our children back the stars," she implored, a silent plea ringing louder than declarations. The tide turned, not just from one speech, but their persistence and proof. Crawford's finesse ignited change within the chamber. Weeks passed filled with talks, late nights where plans formed. Ava's teams transformed settlements, equipping ships with new core systems. Solar replaced reactors, waste recycled into resources. Industry resistance dwindled, replaced by cautious optimism, visions of sustainable profit. Signatures slowly adorned the accord, commitments to a greener future. Crawford watched Ava inspect a retrofitted cruiser, engines now silent. She ran a hand along the hull, her work complete and celebrated, each green light a testament to their victory. Their legacy wasn't monuments or military feats, but the living, breathing galaxy thriving around them. This was the true win, balanced galactic growth, leadership forged not through conquest, but through caring for a star-spanning home. The chamber buzzed as voices of many species blended into a single hum. Major Crawford stood above them on a balcony, hands folded behind his back. Below him, creatures of all kinds filled the seats. It was the first speech by an interspecies government. The room was packed with leaders, not an empty space left. Ava joined Crawford on the balcony, a recorder in hand to capture the event. They shared a knowing look between them. They'd fought and dreamed for this moment. "Look down there," Crawford said, steady as ever. "All so different, yet here for the same reason." Ava agreed. "The future we made together. Now it's their turn to lead." On stage, the new president stepped up, its skin shifting colors to show all the species it represented. It raised its arms, and the room went silent, waiting to hear its words. Ava recorded the speech about common good and peaceful living, the legacy she and Crawford were leaving behind. Later, away from the crowds, Ava met with young minds eager to learn. They gathered close as she spoke firmly, yet with inspiration, about ship engines and physics theories. Crawford watched from a distance, a faint smile on his face. Teaching suited Ava. She was ensuring their work would continue. "Never expected to see you as a teacher," Crawford said after the students had left, newly motivated. Ava chuckled. "Someone's got to make sure it goes on." Crawford looked to the horizon and the twinkling stars. "Thinking of retiring now? We built the base. Let them build on it." Ava followed his gaze upward. "Just promise you'll still look to the stars in wonder." "Don't think I could stop if I tried," he said with a half-smile. They lingered, watching nightfall on Zanara Prime, their time with the Alliance ending, but their legacy just beginning. In the distance, the mystery of the Great Attractor called, a symbol of endless quest for knowledge. The ceremony ended, but its feeling remained. Crawford and Ava spent their lives in service of unity and resilience, a beacon for others to follow into a future of potential.